Hello everyone, I'm Emily with Chipped and Polished, and in today's video I'm working on this drop leaf table. This was a custom piece and it was built by the owner's grandfather. You can see it has a lot of stains and discoloration on the top, and it was really dirty, so it needed some new life given back to it. I started off by cleaning with a 50-50 mixture of water and crud cutter, and then I used this drill attachment just to scrub everything away. I will link these drill attachments in the description. They are fantastic for getting through all of the grime. Whenever you're starting a furniture flip, cleaning your piece first is a really important first step because you don't want to sand down all of that grime and dirt into your new finish or into the wood. After everything had dried out from being cleaned and rinsed thoroughly, it was time to go ahead and start sanding. And I started sanding with a 100 grit sandpaper. And after that, in preparation for staining, I moved on to 120, then 150, and then 180. And yes, it was a lot of sanding, especially when it came to the spindles. And if you think this is a lot of sanding, this isn't even 10% of the 10% I filmed. I only used my sander on the spindles the first time using that 100 grit. I have a foam pad on my sander, so it helps cushion things a bit, and as long as I was quick, it was just easiest to go ahead and use my sander on these the first time just to cut through the majority of it before I moved on to being able to hand sand them with the other grits. And after all of that, it was time to go ahead and start sanding everything by hand that I couldn't get with my sander. And I also went ahead and did the secondary grits by hand on the spindles as well. I really hope that you're enjoying this video so far. If you are, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think, and subscribe for more furniture flipping content. I was hoping that sanding would do away with a lot of this discoloration and the ring on here, but it didn't. So in between bouts of sanding, I took Barkeeper's Friend and water, tried to make a paste, let it sit for a few minutes to get those out. With this first application of Barkeeper's Friend, I don't think that I used enough and I got it too thin. So I did a second application after letting it dry for a bit, got it a little bit thicker, more concentrated, and I applied it with a Q-tip just to the darkened areas. Even here you can see that it's still a little bit thin, so I did end up going back and adding more Barkeeper's Friend to this mixture. I probably ended up doing about a 5-to-1 ratio. Something else that I did differently the second time around was that I also scrubbed at it a bit more. Once that was all rinsed away and had had time to dry out, I decided to go ahead and pay attention to this crack right here. I used Titebond wood glue and pushed that down in there. I knew that I was going to be putting boards on either side of this, so I put parchment paper over the glue to keep those boards from gluing to the table leaf. And if you're wondering why I didn't just put one clamp across this leaf, it's because the leaf edge has a curve to it that gets really thin, so the clamp would have just popped off. The goal for this table was to eliminate any red or orange undertones. So once all of my sanding was done, I started applying a green wash. So since this has orange and red undertones, the green is going to neutralize those colors. If you look at the color wheel, take that color, go to the opposite side, those two cancel each other out. I don't have an exact recipe for my color washes, but I try to do about a 10-to-1 ratio. You can also see here that I am misting the table with water first. That's going to give me a little bit more play time to get things where I need them to be. If you're ever wondering if your wood is going to have those natural red or orange undertones, just spray it with water. That's going to be the color that it would give you naturally if it was just sealed as is. And after your color wash dries, you can also spray that with water again to see if maybe you need another coat or if things are good where they are. I waited to sand with my 180 grit sandpaper until my color wash was dry, since that did raise the grain a little bit. After that, it was time to go ahead and start staining. My clients had chosen the special walnut color from Minwax. I used a lint-free rag to apply this, but you can also use a chip brush if you choose, or a stain applicator pad. My focus here was to avoid any stop and start marks, make sure I got the stain on evenly. After I had left it on for a few minutes, I went ahead and wiped it back with a separate rag. And just a quick note here, you do want to do this with plenty of ventilation. I had brought this table inside because we had storms in our area, but I didn't want to let that stop me. So I just opened the windows and turned on a couple of fans. Something else to remember whenever you're using an oil-based product is that these rags can catch on fire very easily. So you want to make sure that when you're finished with them, you're not just balling them up and throwing them in the trash. Take them somewhere where they're away from anything flammable, lay them flat, put them in a container that's non-flammable with some water, something along those lines. These hinges for the leaves were pretty rusty after being cleaned, so I decided to go ahead and try to get that rust off and then spray paint them. I started off with this brown hammered metallic spray paint. It felt a little bit dark, so before that had dried, I went ahead and grabbed the metallic copper that I had on hand. This gave it a unique two-tone look, but it also lightened it up. Once the stain had dried, you could see that this one leaf on the far left was still pretty persistently red. So I sanded that leaf back and repeated the whole process, and it didn't really work. At that point, I decided to test a blue wash on the underside of it, and that finally did the trick. And I'm pretty much using the same method as I did with my green wash, about a 10-to-1 ratio of paint and water. Just brushing this on, letting it dry a little bit, and then wiping it back with a rag. Once that blue wash was dry, it was time to go ahead and seal everything up. This is Minwax's polyacrylic in the satin sheen. And make sure to stir this thoroughly before pouring a little bit onto the paper plate and then using the blue sponge to apply it. Just like with the stain, you want to try to avoid any stop and start marks when you're using these sponges. Also, I like to try and overlap my strokes by about 50% for full coverage. I've heard a lot of people say that they get streaks using this method. If that happens, sand it with a high grit sandpaper like a 4 or a 600, then do another coat. Also, try not to go over the same area a bunch of times, just once or twice, and then leave it alone. After each coat had dried, I sanded it with a 600 grit sandpaper and then wiped away all of the dust with a damp microfiber cloth. I applied 4 coats to the tabletop and leaves and 3 coats to everything else. After the last coat, I took a 2000 grit sandpaper and sanded everything one more time just to make sure I didn't have any little bumps or anything. You can also see that I have it flipped upside down here in these next few shots. This was just so I could see that there were no drips, and it was also easier for that last final sanding of the spindles. And here is a quick reminder of the before. You can see this table was so worn out when I first started on it. And here it is now. This is going to be the entryway table into my client's home, and I think this is a perfect fit. This wood grain just really pops now. It doesn't have all of those stains blocking it. It looks so beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and like it. Comment, let me know what you think, and subscribe for more furniture flips. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.